So there are so many things going on with the Epstein releases right now that it is insanely difficult to keep up. Things get lost in the shuffle and whatnot, but I wanted to focus on something that happened a few days ago on December 22nd, 2025, which was a statement released by the survivors, or at least some of the survivors, and it was signed by a bunch of them. Um, The statement says the Epstein Files Transparency Act imposed a December 19th, 2025 deadline for the United States Department of Justice to release its full records of the investigation of Jeffrey Epstein and his accomplices and enablers, with specific narrow exceptions such as survivor identities. This law, enacted by a nearly unanimous vote in the House and unanimously in the Senate and signed by the President, was clear. It afforded no permission for delayed disclosure. Instead, the public received a fraction of the files, and what we received was riddled with abnormal and extreme redactions with no explanation. At the same time, financial documents were released. Grand jury minutes, though approved by a federal judge for release, were fully blacked out, not the scattered redactions that might be expected to protect victim names, but 119 full pages blacked out. We are told that there are hundreds of thousands of pages of documents still unreleased. These are clear cut violations of an unambiguous law. Moreover, the partial release was done in a manner that made it difficult or impossible for survivors to find materials that would be most relevant to our search for accountability. There has been no guidance for survivors on how to locate materials pertaining to their own cases, nor have we been provided with copies of our own files despite repeated requests. There has been no communication with survivors or our representatives as to what was withheld from release or why hundreds of thousands of documents have not been disclosed by the legal deadline, or how DOJ will ensure that no more victim names are wrongly disclosed. While clearer communication would not change the fact that the law was broken, its absence suggests an ongoing intent to keep survivors and the public in the dark as much as possible and as long as possible. It is alarming that the United States Department of Justice, the very agency tasked with upholding the law, has violated the law, both by withholding massive quantities of documents and by failing to redact survivor identities. As women who survived the crimes perpetrated by Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, we call upon DOJ to explain to the public why they have missed a legal deadline and to explain to us or our representatives how we can privately obtain copies of all documents in DOJ possession that identify us by name. For documents that are publicly released, careful, lawful redaction is essential. Transparency must focus on institutional failures, enablers, financial records, and government conduct, not on further endangering survivors. Moreover, we can call upon Congress to stand up for the rule of law. We urge immediate congressional oversight, including hearings, formal demands for compliance, and legal action to ensure the Department of Justice fulfills its legal obligations. This is not a partisan issue. Just as the Epstein Files Transparency Act was supported across party lines, we now ask elected officials from both parties to take decisive action to enforce the law, compel full compliance, and ensure meaningful transparency without further delay. Survivors deserve truth. Survivors whose identities are private deserve protection. The public deserves accountability, and the law must be enforced. And then it is signed by quite a few survivors. 18, I think. It looks like 18 survivors signed this. So this, I couldn't have said this any better. Like, this is the most clear-cut calling out of everything that the DOJ has done wrong since they began releasing the files. And every time that the DOJ gets called out, they say, well, we're trying to obey the law. We're trying to protect the survivors. And this blows a hole in both of those claims. And it comes from a source, the survivors themselves, that should be almost unimpeachable. But of course, we're talking about MAGA, so they will probably go ahead and try to say this whole thing is a Democrat hoax or some shit like that. But this is the call out that we needed from the source that we needed it from. And I salute the courage of these women in standing up, speaking truth to power, and calling out this administration and their abusers and all of the lies and cover-ups and everyone who is complicit.